they got charged with money laundering, tax crimes, fraud, and it
Right.
literally the fraud was that they were using the bylaws to pretend that they were not getting paid. So it was like all right there at the very genesis. And at one point, I mean, it basically I gave them the roadmap, and I heard back that the roadmap was used.
You were one of the main factors in why Steve Bannon was investigated. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about that. And thank goodness for your great journalism and your great work in doing so. Steve Bannon, I know he's not going to be going back to jail, at least not anytime soon for this.
That we
But
know of.
that we know of. Just a horrible guy. Horrible. Can you talk to us about that and what you were able to do in order to get him investigated and eventually convicted?
Oh, thanks for asking, man. Well, 5 years and 8 months ago, I got a tip. And the tipster said, "You've got to look into these We Build the Wall people." Because they came to me and said they were broke because Facebook had deplatformed them. They had a Facebook page called Right Wing News, which is pretty ironic. And they were kicked off for repeated and never ending falsehoods masquerading as news. So naturally, I looked into it before I wrote any story, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And the source was like, "Look, you know that I know what this life's. I'm a reasonable person. I'd actually reported on this source in what feels like a previous life now, but it was only a few years earlier, before I had even known what political party he might find
Yep.
attractive." And so this is someone that I trusted. And sure enough, they were right. They said, "I think there might be something illegal here. It looks like this guy's paying for his boat, his house, his car." It was all very fancy, right? And crucially, the house that he was in was not the house that the Gary Sinise Foundation had purchased for the founder of this company. So I wrote the story. I published it. It got 330,000 reads within 24 hours,
Wow.
which is a heck of a lot,
Yeah.
okay? And I mean, it just went bonkers. Once you hit about 300,000, you're like nationally seen. And
Sure.
so this
Yep.
guy wrote back to me. I sent him questions and he didn't answer before the thing came out. I
Mhm.
called his spokespeople before the article came out. And then I went to Mother's Day brunch. And I get back from Mother's Day brunch and there's the email and we started talking, right? And I was like, "Hey, you're making all these claims. You're not going to make any money from this. How can you prove that?" He said, "We have bylaws. The bylaws say I won't take a penny from it." I'm like, "Well, you give me a copy of them." He said, Go get them yourself," which is funny because corporate bylaws, you can't just get them somewhere. The corporations have them. They're like,
Right. Of
they're,
course.
they're private information.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I wrote up the story and then I updated it a couple of times with our discussions. And as we were sending the emails out, he wrote, "Well, I'm going to contact Snopes." Snopes.com, the urban
Yep.
mythbusters.
Yep.
And I was like, "Go right ahead. I'm contacting a fact checker too." I found out later that Snopes was one of the main reasons he lost his whole thing in the first place, which is kind of funny that he would go to Snopes to try and debunk me. And,
Right.
Snopes poked around a little bit, wrote a story about it. I had to write them back, by the way, because they had messed up. Their story missed so many points. I was like, "Corporate law," and they're like, "Oh, geez, you're right, you're right." Like I said, I was like, "Look, here's all the," because I'm in Florida, I'm from here, I own a small financial business, I know this kind of stuff, and sure enough, that email that they sent to the Florida Attorney General it got forwarded to the investigators who had already been looking into We Build the Wall,
Mhm.
just on a civil level. And they opened the civil investigation that turned into a criminal investigation because of my reporting, because of his running off to Snopes. But my reporting literally caused the investigation. The chain of
Well,
events happened that way, and I
and
got
let
the
me.
email to prove it.
No, your work is incredible, and I thank you, and I think a lot of people that are watching and listening to this show right now, thank you for that. It's
Oh,
interesting,
let me
isn't
say
it?
this though. Let me
Yeah.
say this about this because I
Yep.
wrote that story. It sparked the investigation. I got the evidence that the investigation had opened, and I wrote a really long follow-up story with David K. Johnson as the editor, the
Yep.
Pulitzer-winning journalist, right?
Mhm.
And I put in there like all the things I thought they were doing wrong with their company. I interviewed multiple lawyers about all the corporate stuff. And I said that, it looked like they were using it like a tax alter ego.
Right.
They got charged with money laundering, tax crimes, fraud, and it like literally the fraud was that they were using the bylaws to pretend that they were not getting paid. So it was like all right there at the very genesis. And at one point, I mean, basically I gave them the roadmap, and I heard back that the roadmap was used. So I thought that was like that was what was so amazing about it. And then I was very fortunate to break that there was a criminal investigation exclusively. And on the morning Donald Trump, on the morning Trump pardoned him federally, I was able to report that the Florida investigation was ongoing. And that was the investigation that got handed off to New York and resulted in the plea deal.
Yeah. Well, thank God for that. In a world where, as Elon Musk would put it, all these independent journalists, it pisses me off. I'm sure it pisses you off because these people can't even spell the word journalism, and they just attack people on X, and they call themselves journalists and these exposés, and they have no degrees. They have never worked for a company before. They don't know what real journalism is. They're the ones that call CNN fake news and, attack, whether it be Occupy Democrats. If they disagree with good journalism, they call it fake news, right? And this is the era, Grant, that we are living in now, where anybody can just call themselves a journalist. But if you kiss the ring of Donald Trump, you'll get a media credential and you'll get to go to some of those White House press briefings and ask Caroline Leavitt what it's like working for a king every day and how wonderful she looks. And it's just pathetic. The times that we are living in today are pathetic. Yeah. There are a few good journalists out there, and you obviously are one of them.